Hi, I'm Corey Driver, and this is Moving Forward. So this week we are in Genesis 18, Psalm 15, and Luke 10, and we are talking about what kind of Christianity are we following? So it may seem in the early 20th century we are in a unique predicament when there's different versions of Christianity and what following Jesus looks like being debated and performed in the public sphere. However, as is usually the case, we've seen this before. In the centuries after Jesus' resurrection, there's at least a couple different flavors of Christianity that are growing in increasing popularity. Constantine, the ruler of the Roman Empire, thinks he sees a vision of Jesus and the first two Greek letters of the name Christ, the chi and the rho, shown in the sky, and he thinks he hears, "In this sign conquer." Use Jesus' title to kill people. Okay. In a time not so very far away, there is another character named Saint Anthony. And Saint Anthony goes out into the Egyptian wilderness to live by himself. Well, relatively by himself. There's a community that goes with him and that attends to him as well. He's not really by himself, but he is not in the midst of the power of empire. He seeks to demonstrate another way of refusing power and being beyond the temptation to make oneself great. There have always been these two flavors in Christianity. Christian nationalism that seeks to cooperate, at the very least, with empire to make a country great, and Christian community that says, let's not do that. Let's find a way to pray, study, and eat together and take care of guests. The lectionary readings this week model these choices for us. In the psalm for this week, the psalmist describes who may live in God's presence and who will be a citizen of God's city. This person must speak with integrity and, crucially, may not slander anyone, may not do any evil to a neighbor, and may not even bring shame on a friend. If someone makes money through charging interest to others when they need funds, or especially if somebody takes bribes or has some sort of financial benefit for targeting the innocent, that person is on very shaky ground. One cannot follow God, much less be a leader of other people who are trying to follow God, if they are known for lying, for insulting or shaming others, for making use of interest to build a fortune, or receiving financial support to target the innocent people that God particularly cares about: widows, orphans, the poor, and foreigners. The citizen of God's kingdom is honest, kind, full of financial integrity, and passionately pursuing justice and welcome for everyone. That's from the Psalms. In Genesis, Abraham demonstrates what it's like to live as God desires. When residing as a foreigner in the Canaanite Heights, Abraham saw three people approaching him during the heat of the day. Now, Abraham has just circumcised himself and is not feeling great. Nevertheless, he springs up and runs to his guests, identifies them as guests, asks them if he can provide for them, and then runs around asking Sarah to make a great quantity of bread, and then running after meat, cheese, preparing a giant meal. Abraham doesn't inquire who they are. Anybody coming to him was an opportunity to provide welcome. And he makes himself quite uncomfortable for their sake. This is how a friend of God behaves. Finally, then, we turn to Martha and Mary. Now, for context, many scholars, and I agree, understand that Martha and Mary and Lazarus, and maybe Simon, run a poorhouse or a hospice or some sort of pilgrim hospital for those who are on the way to Jerusalem but cannot make it for one reason or another. They've run out of funds, they've contracted a illness that will bar them from completing the temple rites, or they're just sick and can't go on any further or can't return to their home. And so they run this free hospital, poorhouse, hospice out of the good of their hearts. Indeed, the name of the town, Bethania, that we render as Bethany, probably means exactly poorhouse or a free clinic, something like that. So, as in many situations where the need outweighs the resources, Martha, whose name means master, which is pretty cool, felt responsible for all the people who came under her roof, very much sounding like Psalm 15 or Abraham looking for opportunities to provide for guests. And as in the case of most pastor types and NGO leaders that I know, she works herself a little too hard to take care of the needs of others. Mary, her sister, is taking a break from that work to become a disciple of Jesus. And let's be clear, she is intentionally becoming a disciple of Jesus using all the formal language, or at least Luke does when describing her, about becoming a disciple. She sits at Jesus's feet. This is not merely a geographical location, but that is the term for somebody studying with her or his master. See Acts 22:3. So Martha chooses to serve, as she did day in and day out, and Mary chooses to study. Great. Martha's choice was fine for her, and we need to be explicitly clear on that. What is not okay is when Martha tried to enlist Jesus to reject Mary as a disciple and return her to service. Jesus would not abide this coercion. He informed Martha that Mary had chosen the good portion, which is not to say the better portion, and that's really important. The good part, or the good portion, again, is an idiom for Torah study. We're looking at Mishnah Berachot 4:2 for that reference. Again, we're using the explicit language of Torah studying disciple here for Mary. It's not that this is a ranked choice thing. It's that Mary has chosen to follow Jesus in a way, and Martha is not allowed to force her to give that up. Also, Jesus has great concern for Martha and says, "You are worried about many, many things. Only one is necessary." What is that only one? I've heard this teaching said that, like, oh, you should also give up stuff and study. Maybe, maybe not. I don't see that. Instead, I think Jesus is saying, look, I happen to love when people take care of the poor and the sick. I'm going to insist on that for all of my followers. I'm going to hang out with you a lot. You're a family that I love, right? There is no rejection or rebuke of Martha in her tasks. There is care for somebody who is laying her life out to take care of other people's, and say, look, maybe just one thing at a time. Don't get overwhelmed. You're chasing after many things. Only one. Martha is Jesus's good friend, and she takes care of people exactly like Jesus tells his disciples to take care of people. That is a good choice. Mary sits at Jesus's feet and studies. That is a good choice. Both are pathways for how God desires for humans to act. So look, friends, there's a lot of different flavors of Christianity vying for ascendance these days. Whatever else, Christians are to respond to God's grace by taking care of others, acting justly, welcoming foreigners, and living with integrity. Thanks be to God. Amen.